You're tuned in to the National Intel Report, the Real Talk Radio Show.
Bob writes, since hyperinflation is clearly in our future, I want Bob to talk about what inflation really is, what causes it, what the different degrees or levels of inflation are, and what it takes to put a stop to inflation. Bob?
Well, I guess I have to go along with that, and that is with inflation, does that mean the house prices will increase? And if so, will mortgage debt load become less significant or easy to repay, or will high interest rates make it so painful that to service the debt it wouldn't be possible to take advantage? Inflation. The real underlying inflation that we have today is not generally price inflation. We're seeing a little bit of it here in petroleum products, and it's an ongoing problem in food. But both are sort of an end result of the real reason for inflation, and that is the profligacy of the Federal Reserve. And that's where all inflation starts. And we're seeing it in big numbers, $14.8 trillion between the Fed and the Treasury. We get a fiscal problem coming up in September of somewhere between 2 and 2.5 trillion in deficit. We have the Fed in the marketplace purchasing $2.2 trillion worth of toxic waste, Fannie and Freddie paper, and U.S. Treasuries. And, who knows how much they're doing in offshore accounts, et cetera. And, for those who think that the whole story is in the financial statement of the Fed, they better get smart. These guys are doing all kinds of things you don't know about. And on top of that, they're feeding inside information to their friends on Wall Street who are becoming filthy rich, and Goldman Sachs' second quarter earnings are a good example of that. That's how they make that money. That's the only way they can make money in those kind of numbers is to have inside information.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Inflation, which started in the second phase, we'll call it, in May, which was last month, by the end of the year will become very noticeable. It's happening in England already. We're looking at 2.4%. It's starting to rise strongly, and throughout the year it'll happen in the United States as well. The government won't admit to it. We'll have to go dig the figures out and give you the real figures of what inflation are. Inflation right now is 9%, and that's caused mainly by food. But anyway, getting back to the subject, and they can't stop doing that. What is the solution? Purge the system. Get rid of all of the bad investments. Mark them down to whatever they're worth and let the chips fall where they may. And that isn't going to happen unless they're forced to. And that's why they're going through this song and dance of creating all this money and credit. And it's not only America that's doing it. All the countries of the world, and particularly the G20, zero interest rates and increasing money supply at an average of around 14%. The only low exception is the European Central Bank. They're increasing their rates at about 6.8%. And so this is the engine that's got this thing going. It's not going to stop. They can't stop because the minute they step off the treadmill, the whole thing breaks down. And when it breaks down, they're all going to end up in jail.
One could only hope. One could only hope. And you say here that this is why the price of gold and silver must eventually skyrocket. This microeconomic supply, demand, and manipulation factors which currently have sway over gold and silver prices will eventually be trumped by the macroeconomic factors, namely the increase in the money supply of money and credit to unheard-of levels, which is going to drive up prices across the board. The Fed cannot suppress the price of all goods and services as it rampantly expands the supply of money and credit, and can only influence a chosen few, such as gold and silver, which are suppressed because they are, as you put it, Bob, the canaries in the coal mine. When everything else gets more expensive and as the fiat currencies are shown to be the worthless paper they really are, gold and silver would become the only real safe havens from the resulting inflation and financial deterioration. That will then generate a demand for precious metals that is so great it will drive the price of gold and silver up until they catch up with the overall supply of money and credit. And there is nothing the Fed can do to stop it, short of pulling the plug on money and credit and destroying our economy, along with the privately owned Fed itself and its luminous cronies along with it. One could only hope.
Well, that was well said.
You wrote it. I just read it. Let's go to Bill.
Hey, incidentally,
Yeah.
before you go,
Yeah.
Robbie's comment of Bernanke leaving and Summers coming in, I think, is perfect. And Summers wants to run this thing. He's been at this for 13 years in the gold suppression. He was the one who wrote Gibson's Paradox. He is the one who, along with Robert Rubin, started this program of suppression. And now they're either close to or out of gold. And by him being in that position, what he has done is going to become a shining light. And he's probably the first one that's going to go on trial.
Bill in Indiana. Hello, Bill.
Hi, John. Hi to you. Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Hi, Robbie. Hope everyone's doing well. I have two. I'll make them quick questions, okay, in the comment, John? Mm-hmm. Okay. Questions are for Bob. Bob, first, you said on several occasions, I believe, in the International Forecaster, how, you pinpoint February 2009 as the pivot point when the Depression began. Could you elaborate? Because I'd like to know your thought process, how you came up to that.
Well, the thought processes are the different statistics that we keep that the government falsifies. Mm-hmm. And we started talking about recession 2 years before.
Right.
Other people discovered it about a year later, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. We just, we're into it more than other people, evidently. And the numbers that started coming up on production, unemployment, the real PPI and CPI numbers, the M3 numbers, which are at 18% again. Right. I mean, they did slide down to about 11.4, but now they're back up there again. And the fact that other nations are doing the same thing, they're all going to run into the same problem. In fact, I think Europe probably entered depression just before we did, perhaps 3 months before.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you, Bob. That's where where my nose was going, and I appreciate that. Another quick question for you. As you pointed out also, like the banking reserves, a little while ago, before they did the bailouts, were, somewhere between $75 and $90 billion, and now they're close to $1,000 billion. They're not using that money to help the economy recover and grow. I'm sorry. I have a suspicion that they're not going to use that money for us. They're going to use that money for themselves to buy distressed assets at fire sale prices when we're, really in the deep throes of depression. And I had to wonder what you thought about that.
Well, I'm trying to get together enough information to write about that. I've been told privately that 500 to 800 banks will go under this year, and we are not going to be told about it. Mm. And, I think the latest figure is 47. The FDIC is taking banks down, and they're secreting it. They're not telling people. If you live in the neighborhood of XYZ town and that small bank goes under, then you know about it. But the rest of the country doesn't.
Right.
And so I see that moving in leaps and bounds. And, yes, they will, the big banks, the 19 big banks, they will be using some of that money to do that, not to lend to people.
Right.
Another reason they have it on the books is because they have this horrendous debt. And the debt is, sort of collateralized debt obligations, asset-backed securities, and other things. Commercial real estate is really going to throw a blockbuster into their balance sheets.
By the way, Bob, just on that subject, today on Bloomberg News, they had individuals up there talking about exactly that. And their basic statements were today, watch the commercial real estate market. It's really going to tank, and it's going to keep tanking for at least 2 years.
But Moody's and Standard & Poor's just came out and gave America's AAA credit rating high marks.
Yeah, I bet
Well,
they did.
how about the AAA ratings they gave to ABS and CDOs? Give me a break. But anyway, I get two more facets to this answer.
Yeah.
And so all this money that is being used to buy these toxic assets from the bank